Once, in a time when the world moved to the rhythm of the seasons and the soft, steady ticking of grandfather clocks, there lived an honest shoemaker. His name was Anton. He lived with his wife, Martha, in a small, timber-framed house tucked away at the edge of a village where the cobblestone streets always smelled of wood smoke, roasting chestnuts, and the clean scent of winter rain. Anton was a man of quiet dignity. His hair was as silver as a winter's mist, and his hands were weathered by decades of pulling waxed thread through tough hide. He was a craftsman of the old world, a man who believed that every stitch held a piece of the maker's soul. "A shoe is not just leather and nails, Martha," he would often say, his eyes twinkling behind round spectacles. "It is a promise of a safe journey." But times were hard. The winter of that year had been long and bitter. The mountain passes were blocked by snow, and the people of the village had little gold to spend on new boots. They patched their old soles until there was nothing left to patch. One by one, Anton's rolls of leather dwindled. He didn't complain, but at night he would stare at his ledger with a heavy heart. One cold Tuesday evening, as the sun dipped behind the jagged purple peaks of the mountains, leaving only a bruise-coloured light in the sky, Anton sat at his workbench. The only light came from a single tallow candle, its flame dancing in the draught that whistled through the gaps in the window frame. Martha entered, carrying a small bowl of thin soup. "Is that the last of it, Anton?" she asked softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "The very last, my dear," Anton replied, adjusting his spectacles. He looked down at the piece of leather, a beautiful, deep mahogany hide, supple and rich. "Enough for one pair of shoes. If I do not sell these by Friday, I don't know how we shall buy flour for the Christmas bread." He took his heavy iron shears. With a hand that didn't tremble despite his hunger, he carefully cut out the pieces, the vamps, the quarters, and the soles. He was too tired to sew them that night. He laid them neatly on his bench, side by side, like a puzzle waiting to be solved. "I will rise at dawn," he whispered. "The morning light is honest. It will guide my needle." He blew out the candle, and as the smoke curled into the darkness, he left the workshop to the silence of the frost. The next morning, the world was encased in a shell of silver ice. Anton washed his face in freezing water, said his morning prayers, and entered the workshop. He expected to find the cut-out pieces of leather just as he had left them, cold and lifeless. But as he approached the bench, he stopped dead in his tracks. His jaw dropped. There, sitting exactly where the mahogany leather had been, was a pair of shoes. They were not just finished, they were masterpieces. Anton picked one up, his fingers trembling. Each stitch was so small and even, it was almost invisible. The leather had been polished to a luster so deep it looked like dark water under a summer sun. "Martha! Martha, come quickly. Look at this." Martha hurried into the room, wiping her hands on her apron. She gasped, clutching her chest. "Anton, when did you finish them? I didn't hear the hammer." "I didn't," Anton whispered, turning the shoe over. "Look at the welt. Look at the heel. It's perfect, not a single flaw. It is as if they were sewn by the fingers of a spirit." Suddenly the shop bell chimed. It was the village mayor, a man of great girth and even greater ego, known for his love of fine things. He marched in, his nose in the air. "Shoemaker, I need boots for the winter ball. Something to show my status." His eyes fell upon the mahogany shoes. He grabbed them, examining the work. "By the stars! I have travelled to the capital, but I have never seen such craftsmanship. These aren't shoes. They are jewels for the feet." The mayor didn't even ask the price. He threw a heavy purse of gold coins onto the table, triple what Anton usually charged. "Make me more. I want boots for my wife and my daughters." With the mayor's gold, Anton was able to buy leather for 2 more pairs. That evening, he cut the pieces again. And again the next morning, 2 pairs of boots stood ready. One pair was a delicate forest green, and the other a sturdy black with silver eyelets. Night after night, the miracle repeated. Anton would cut, and the invisible hands would sew. The fame of the mysterious shoemaker spread like wildfire. People travelled from distant towns, merchants, knights, even a duchess, just to see the shoes that seemed to be sewn by the wind itself. Anton and Martha were no longer hungry. Their larder was full of honey, white flour, smoked ham, and fresh milk. But Anton remained a humble man. He didn't buy a carriage or a palace. He stayed in his small house, still cutting the leather himself, still honouring the craft. One evening, as Christmas Eve drew near, the snow began to fall in large, heavy flakes, draping the world in a velvet white silence. Anton sat by the hearth, watching the embers glow. "Martha," he said, his voice reflecting the firelight, "we have been blessed. Our debt is gone, our bellies are full, but my soul is restless. I cannot go another year without knowing who our friends are. I want to thank them. Shall we stay awake tonight and watch?" Martha nodded, her eyes bright. "I have prepared a pot of tea and hidden it behind the curtain. Let us see who works while the world sleeps." They lit no candles. The workshop was bathed in the pale, ghostly light of the full moon, reflecting off the snow outside. The clock on the wall, tick, 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 seemed louder than usual. They hid behind a heavy velvet curtain in the corner, holding their breath. Then, just as the village bell tolled midnight, the air in the room seemed to shimmer. A tiny golden light appeared, spinning like a moth around the workbench. Through the cracks in the floorboards and the shadows of the eaves, two tiny figures emerged. They were elves, no taller than a spool of thread. They were quite bare, their skin pale as cream, wearing nothing to protect them from the winter chill. With a nimbleness that defied the eye, they leaped onto the workbench. They didn't speak in human words, but their laughter sounded like tiny silver bells. "Look, Flicker, fine leather today, mahogany and gold," said one. "Quick, Needle, the sun won't wait for slow stitches. Tap, tap, so, replied the other. They picked up the awls and the needles. Their little hands moved like hummingbirds. Tap, tap, tap went the tiny hammers. Swish, swish, swish went the silk thread through the hide. They danced as they worked, skipping over the shears and sliding down the rolls of leather. Behind the curtain, Martha gripped Anton's hand. Her heart ached. These tiny creatures were working so hard, providing for them. Yet they had nothing but their own joy to keep them warm. The elves finished the last stitch, polished the leather with a tiny piece of silk, and poof! They vanished back into the shadows as the first light of dawn touched the window pane. "Anton," Martha whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. "They have given us our life back, and yet they have nothing, not even a shirt to keep out the frost. I want to make them something." "And I," Anton replied, his heart swelling. "I will make them shoes, not for sale, but for love." For the next few days, the workshop was a hive of secret, joyous activity. Martha used her finest needles and most delicate linen. She sewed 2 tiny shirts, 2 pairs of trousers made of soft blue wool, and 2 little coats with gold buttons. She even knitted stockings no bigger than a thimble. Anton worked with his smallest tools. He chose the softest kidskin leather, red as a robin's breast. He crafted shoes so tiny they could fit on a man's thumb, complete with tiny buckles of real silver. On Christmas Eve, instead of the usual cut-out leather, they laid the gifts on the workbench, 2 complete outfits arranged neatly under the moonlight. Then they hid. At midnight, the elves arrived. They skipped onto the bench, expecting work. But when they saw the clothes, they stopped. They tilted their heads. They touched the soft wool and the shining leather. "Clothes for us! Shoes for us!" they chirped. They dressed with lightning speed. They pulled on the stockings, buttoned the coats, and stepped into the silver-buckled shoes. They looked at their reflection in Anton's polished shears, posing and bowing to one another. They began to sing a song of pure happiness, a melody that felt like starlight made sound. They danced over the table, over the stools, and even did a somersault over the inkwell. "Now we are boys, so fine and neat. Why shoe the world with weary feet. They danced out through the window, leaving a trail of golden dust that sparkled in the moonlight like falling stars. The elves did not return the next night. Anton and Martha waited, but the workbench remained empty of magic. At first, there was a quiet loneliness in the shop. But as Anton picked up his tools the next morning, he realized something. His hands didn't feel heavy anymore. The leather felt more supple. The thread seemed to glide. The elves hadn't left because they were finished with him. They had left because they had restored his spirit. They had reminded him that he was a master and that kindness is the greatest currency of all. Anton and Martha lived a long and very happy life. They were never poor again. For every pair of shoes Anton made from that day forward seemed to carry a bit of that midnight magic. People said that whoever wore Anton's shoes walked a little lighter, felt a little braver, and always found their way home. The wisdom the elves left behind was clearer than any gold. Work done with love attracts the help of the heavens, and gratitude is the bridge that lets magic cross into our world. And so the workshop remained warm, the leather remained plentiful, and the memory of the golden dust stayed in their hearts forever. The fire is low now, my little one. The stars are watching over you, tucked in their blanket of night. The world is full of quiet magic, waiting for those who work with love. Sweet dreams. Sleep well.